They gave me a cart, a mop, and a badge that said Ray in block letters, and for 3 years that was enough. I was good at the work. Quiet floors, clean lobbies, the kind of invisible labor that only gets noticed when it stops. I didn't need anyone at Hollis Logistics to know my name. I just needed the hours. My son Marcus was 26 and still walking with a slight pull in his right leg from a car accident when he was 9. Every few months, a follow-up at the orthopedic clinic across town. That Tuesday morning in January, his ride fell through. I drove him, sat in the waiting room until the doctor came out, made sure he was squared away, and then drove straight to the office tower on Meridian Street. I clocked in 41 minutes late. I knew what I was walking into when Linda from HR met me at the elevator and asked me to come upstairs. The CEO's office was on the 14th floor, all glass and gray steel, the kind of room designed to remind you how small you are. Derek Hollis was standing at his desk when I came in, not sitting, standing, like the conversation was already over, and he was just waiting for me to catch up. He was a trim man in his early 50s, dark suit, silver at the temples. He'd asked me to sit down. "Third late arrival in 6 months," he said. He had a folder open in front of him. My file. I supposed. I told him the truth. My son had a medical appointment. His ride didn't show. I had no backup this morning. He nodded slowly. The way people nod when they've already decided and are simply tolerating the explanation. "We have a policy, Ray. Consistency matters at every level of this organization. It sets the tone." I looked at him steadily. I wasn't angry. I've lived long enough to know that anger in a room like that just gives the other man something to point at later. "I understand," I said. "I'm going to have to let you go." He said it the way you'd read a weather forecast. He closed the folder. "Linda will process the paperwork. We'll have your final check ready by Thursday." That was the whole conversation. 4 minutes, maybe 5. He picked up his phone before I'd even turned for the door. I rode the elevator back down alone. I thought about Marcus, about the clinic copay I'd just set down on his behalf, about the overtime I'd been counting on. I wasn't devastated. I've been through worse. But I won't pretend there wasn't a weight to it. That quiet, specific weight of treated like a number on a sheet by a man who'd never once looked you in the eye. I collected my cart from the second-floor utility closet. A few personal items. A small framed photo of Marcus at his high school graduation, a thermos, a spare pair of work gloves. I laid them in a canvas bag, turned in my badge at the front desk, and walked toward the lobby exit. That's when I saw him through the glass. Hollis had come down to the mezzanine level, probably heading to a morning meeting. He was crossing the open walkway above the lobby, phone in hand, jacket off now, his left sleeve rolled to the elbow, and there it was, a pale crescent scar, 3 inches long, curved just below the inside of his forearm, the kind of mark a seatbelt leaves when the metal buckle burns. I stopped walking. I stood there in the lobby with my canvas bag and my thermos, and 14 years came back to me in about 2 seconds flat. Route 11, a Tuesday night in February, freezing rain turning the highway to glass. I'd been driving home from a long shift. Back then, I ran a boiler maintenance route for an industrial contractor, late nights, rural highways. I saw the headlights first, going sideways across the median. A silver sedan had hit a patch of black ice near the Hendricks overpass and gone hard, into the guardrail. By the time I pulled over and got out, smoke was coming from under the hood. I remember the door was jammed. I remember pulling at it until my shoulder screamed. I got it open on the third pull and dragged the man out. Mid-40s then, dressed like he'd been at a business dinner, dazed and bleeding from his forehead, not fully conscious. I laid him in the grass away from the car. The engine caught 30 seconds later. The whole front end went up. I sat with him in the freezing rain until the ambulance arrived. When the paramedics took over, I gave a brief statement to the deputy who showed up, and then I drove home because Marcus was 9 years old and waiting, and I had a boiler route at 5 in the morning. I never gave my name to the press. I never called the hospital. I didn't want a story made out of it. A man was alive. That seemed like the whole point. Now I was standing in the lobby of his building, looking up at the scar I'd watched a paramedic bandage on the side of a wet highway. I thought about going back upstairs. I thought about a lot of things. Then I pushed through the front door and walked out into the January cold. I was 2 blocks from the parking structure when I heard footsteps behind me. Fast, deliberate. The sound of leather soles on cold concrete. Ray. I turned around. Hollis was there, no jacket, his breath coming in small white clouds. He had an expression I hadn't seen on him upstairs. Something stripped of the boardroom composure. Something that looked, if I'm honest, a lot like a man who'd just been handed a piece of information he didn't know how to carry. I waited. He stopped a few feet from me. He looked at my face the way people look when they're trying to locate a memory they should have kept better. Then he said quietly, "Gerald Oakes, my facilities director." He recognized you when you turned in your badge. He said he'd read about you in the county paper years ago. A highway rescue on Route 11. I didn't say anything. February 14th, he said. 14 years ago. A silver car, near the Hendricks overpass. He paused. That was me. I nodded. I know, I said. I recognized the scar. He stood there for a moment with that. The wind came down the street and neither of us moved. I didn't know, he finally said. It wasn't an excuse. It was just true. When you came into my office this morning, I didn't. I had no idea. Of course not, I said. We'd never met. It was dark and it was raining and you were half conscious. I adjusted the canvas bag on my shoulder. I wasn't looking for credit, Mr. Hollis. I was just driving home. His jaw tightened. He looked down at the scar on his forearm, an unconscious thing. The look you give an old mark when it suddenly means more than it used to. I looked for the man who pulled me out, he said. For about a year afterward, the deputy's report had a partial description and a vehicle type. Nothing else. My wife and I, we wanted to find him. He stopped. You. You had other things to worry about, I said. I owe you my life, he said, and I just fired you. He said the second sentence like he was testing whether he'd heard himself correctly the first time. I looked at him evenly. I didn't feel triumphant. That's not what I felt. I felt something quieter than that, the odd, full feeling of a thing coming around to where it was always supposed to land. My son needed a doctor's appointment, I said. That's why I was late. I don't expect that changes your policy. It changes something, he said. He asked me to come back. He said it plainly, not as a CEO filling a slot, but as a man trying to close a debt he hadn't known he was carrying. He said the job was mine for as long as I wanted it. Full-time with benefits and a bump that I won't pretend I didn't need. I told him I'd think about it. I meant it. I didn't say yes on the sidewalk because I didn't want him to think he'd bought something. I wanted him to sit with it overnight, the same way I'd been sitting with a lot of things for 3 years. I called him the next morning and said yes. Not because of what happened on Route 11, but because I am a man who still needs to work. And Marcus's follow-ups don't get cheaper with time. When I came back in that Thursday, Gerald Oakes shook my hand in the lobby with both of his. Some of the other building staff had heard the story by then. These things travel fast in a 14-floor building. Hollis stopped by the second floor around noon. Not to make a speech, not to make anything out of it. He just nodded at me across the hallway. A small, deliberate nod, the kind that carries everything that can't be said in a corridor. I nodded back and went on with my work. There are men in this world who pull you out of burning cars and never ask for a thing. And there are moments, quiet, sidewalk moments in the January cold, when the world finally catches up to what it owes them. I didn't need the world to remember, but I won't lie to you, it felt good to be seen.